Too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. Or that the everlasting had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter. Oh, God.
I would put Shakespeare very high on the list because the soul of mankind matters as much as the science of the universe. And Shakespeare held the soul of mankind in his hands.
He is the world's most famous writer, and yet we know very little about him. William Shakespeare, number 5, would have appreciated that irony. Few artists had such a subtle grasp of the human heart and such a rich command of the tales he wove.
One is tempted to say that Shakespeare was the greatest writer who ever lived or ever could live, because it's almost unimaginable that the wits of the genius could ever be matched again. He's an extraordinary constructor of plots, extraordinary psychologist, a great myth maker, but the language above all, I suppose, is what establishes him as just the leading writer of the world, to me.
He came to London from the English countryside, and by 1592 he was crafting a successful career as an actor, author, and poet. His performances took him from the stage of the Globe Theatre to the court of Queen Elizabeth. He captivated audiences, although at the time he was considered an untutored genius, a little rough around the edges. A century later, the full measure of his achievement would be acknowledged. For in some 154 sonnets and 38 plays, through Othello and Lear and Richard III, Shakespeare created a timeless dramatic mirror of the way we live.
When we see a young man incapable of making a decision, an important decision, we think Hamlet. When we see an old man who is turned upon by his children and feels that his life has been worthless, we think of Lear. When we think of lovers, we think of Romeo and Juliet, and so on and so on and so on. You cannot name another writer who has created the models for the way we think as Shakespeare.
Today, the works of Shakespeare are performed more than any other playwright. His plays are transformed into musicals, operas, ballets, and of course, movies, for they are the inspiration we return to again and again.
I suppose if someone could name me a film that didn't draw directly from Shakespeare, I would think that that person was the next William Shakespeare. Because I think every plot, every story that anyone tells pretty much falls in step with the plots that Shakespeare invented. All of us, have William Shakespeare to thank.
Shakespeare's works invite imitation. They almost beg for it.
Two Gentlemen of Malibu. Have you ever heard that one? Oh, yet this simple wave will break slowly, yet not knowing why. Oh, boogie on, this not knowing this thing I do call thee friend, wax my board, and not know who thee are. Oh, gentle Richard, would that I had not known why. I don't care. It'd be great to think if Shakespeare could write Richard IV, I'm not willing, trapped before my time, sent undine and not knowing. Ill laughed, and they do laugh at my shadow. I'm not a crook, yet knowing this, I will splice until dawn and walk towards the copter unknown.
The richness of Shakespeare's inspiration, the complexity of his works, has led some people to ask, how could the son of a glove maker who never traveled beyond England be the author of such exquisite words? Some claim that Shakespeare was a front for a man of more noble birth who wished to be anonymous. One of the suspects is our number 38, Sir Francis Bacon.
Well, they also think it's not just Francis Bacon. It's like, the Earl of Oxford, There's a huge debate about that. I mean, here's the deal. You basically think of, at that time, look in the plays. There's incredible references in Latin, Greek, travel. I mean, the scope is global. And yet, it's, if you think if it's Will just wandering around, knocking on doors in Stratford going, is this to be or not to be?
But in the end, perhaps it really doesn't matter who wrote Shakespeare's words, for they are powerful and they endure.
Those plays, what are they, 500 years old now, continue to work, and they continue to work visually, theatrically, and personally. Hamlet, we know exactly who that is. And Lear, and also that range of what it is to be young and narcissistic and self-indulgent and what it is to be old and knowing it's over, and to be able to touch the heart that deeply.
Will Shakespeare live on forever? Yes, Shakespeare, will certainly live beyond, I think, most of the people on this list.